Hello, welcome back to The Collision. It's Daniel here again. Do you guys hear jungle drums? It must mean that a new Jumanji movie's in the theaters. Jumanji, the next level. So let's talk about it. So if you were a child of the 90s like I was, then the name Jumanji probably stirs some kind of nostalgia for you. Especially all the more since the late Robin Williams passed away. It kind of just holds a special place in kind of our childhoods. A lot of us grew up with this movie. I did try and rewatch it not that long ago with my wife. I gotta say, it doesn't quite hold up as good as maybe we remember it did. But still, there's a lot of good feelings attached to it. And the original came out, I think, in '95, so it's been a long time. The first sequel, Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, came out a couple of years ago. In a lot of ways, it was sort of like this big surprise. No one really saw it coming. I know there's a lot of kind of skepticism towards, why even try and go back to this old franchise, kind of leave it in the past. But it exploded. It made almost $1 billion at the box office and got, for the most part, good reviews. A lot of big name actors were brought into it. You got The Rock, you got Kevin Hart, Jack Black, Karen Gillan. You got a lot of big name actors. And just sort of the premise of taking this kind of the board game concept and updating it to a video game was just sort of a brilliant take on kind of how to return to this story in a way that was fresh and different. So a lot of people loved that movie, made a lot of money, and in Hollywood eyes, that means a sequel was inevitable. We knew we were going to get another one, and we did. So Jumanji: The Next Level came out in theaters this week, and I'll be honest, I didn't see the first sequel to Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle. The general premise of it kind of intrigued me, making it into a video game. The trailers itself just didn't interest me. I wasn't reviewing movies back then, so I didn't really have any need to go see it. So I didn't see it, and as I'll share in a second, I wasn't missing out on anything, because they make sure that you're caught up with what happened in the first movie, kind of hit you over the head with it. But Jumanji: The Next Level, is it able to kind of recapture some of the magic, is this going to be a surprise hit like the first one was? And the answer to that, from someone that didn't see the first one, is absolutely not. This film is arguably one of the worst movies I've seen this year. And I've seen some bad movies this year, but this movie, for many reasons, it feels like a movie that was purely made just to cash in on a kind of a new popular franchise. There's not a whole lot of reason for this movie to exist, not a whole lot of fresh ideas. So let's get into it. The film, kind of the new spin for this one. Again, if you're familiar with kind of the first sequel, there's these kids. They're high school kids now. They've graduated. They're in college. They get sucked into this video game and become kind of these avatars, which is The Rock and kind of these kind of stereotypical, kind of over the top video game characters. And I think a lot of the fun of the premise is this body swapping gimmick where you can have kind of a scrawny, kind of cowardly guy in the body of The Rock. You can have a kind of a real ditzy diva girl that's in the body of Jack Black. So you can kind of play off of that. And I can see why that gimmick itself, I can see a lot of the success, or why the first one was successful. There's a whole, this is wide open for different gags and jokes you can do with it. The way they kind of switch that up is they bring in kind of the old timers. You got Danny DeVito and Danny Glover, these two old grandpa figures that get sucked into the game as well. So you have like Danny DeVito in the body of The Rock, and some of the humor and some of the gags that you can do with that. And I think on paper, you can see why this would be kind of an interesting premise. Who wouldn't be intrigued by seeing Dwayne The Rock Johnson kind of acting like Danny DeVito? So I think it's an intriguing premise. The problem is that the gimmick just does not work. Especially with the two kind of the older grandpa figures. The other, Danny Glover, goes into the body of Kevin Hart. But the humor and the gags with kind of related to those characters just falls so flat. And it seems like they just didn't have an idea of kind of what humor to play off of. You got these old guys, and at first they're kind of they have bad memories. They're trying to figure out what's a video game, and every time someone mentions a character or an avatar, say, hey, isn't that Jeffrey's little boy? I know him, or that's my dentist. And it's somewhat kind of amusing at first, but that's sort of all they do with it. And, they're doing the same gags in the third act as they were in the first act. And they just didn't have a whole lot of ideas for how to make it funny. The accents are goofy. The Rock trying to act like Danny DeVito, his accent kind of goes in and out. And it's just not funny. There wasn't a whole lot of laughter, if any, in my theater. It just kind of came off a little tiresome. And again, like I said, I haven't seen the first sequel, and they have, because there's two new characters in the video game, kind of these two old timers. The filmmakers kind of use that as a platform to get viewers caught up on the last movie and kind of explain the mechanics of this video game and how to check what your strengths and weaknesses and kind of what the rules of the game are. I kind of knew some of it going in already, and they caught you up on that, but then they keep doing it. And, even by the time you get to like the third act of the movie, they're still explaining stuff that they've done, like how to check what your weaknesses are. They're still asking, is this a video game? And, talking about the levels and how things work and what everyone's role is. And so much of the film is just sort of spent trying to make sure that everyone's caught up with what happened in the last movie, that it just becomes tiresome, even for someone that didn't know what happened last movie. It felt, in a lot of ways, like kind of a string of Saturday Night Live sketches where it's, they just sort of come up with some kind of crazy new little gimmick or gag, for about 15 minutes. They have some little adventure or something they do, then they move on to the next thing. There's nothing's tying in. There's no kind of through line. It's just they're throwing random stuff at you left and right, and it's just hard to kind of connect when it's just changing kind of rapid pace. And again, the humor, when the humor does hit now, the rare times it does hit, it's usually with the original cast, the younger characters and how they relate to each other, which made me I could see why the first one probably was more enjoyable that way. When the humor doesn't land, it's really just with the two older characters and just kind of a lack of ideas in that way. As far as maybe some points to consider, I guess, as Christians, one of the things that stood out to me, which was surprising, is there's a lot of profanity in this film. Again, they're not dropping F-bombs. There's none of those in the movie. But for a family film, or at least based on the original as a family film, there's a lot of it's kind of a barrage of words that start with S and different words like that. All the characters are cussing, and they use it pretty directly. Zoom right into a character. The cuss, and I found it just really off-putting. Again, there were some kind of younger kids in the theater that I was in, and they were kind of chuckling every time these characters would cuss, and I found it off-putting. They use kind of the Lord's name in vain, maybe 5, if not more times. It was very unnecessary, and I think in some ways it just reflected that they didn't have a whole lot of just funny material. They kind of scoop the bottom of the barrel, and they just gonna go to zooming in on a character when something bad's happening and he cusses, and that's supposed to be kind of funny. And a lot of times cussing is, if it's, I think sometimes it can be justified if it's a real intense situation, and I'm not always super bothered by it. I can handle it, but for this film and kind of the tone it was going for, I found it really off-putting. One of the byproducts kind of the body swapping gimmick, which has been used well before, even Shazam earlier this year, probably one of my favorite films that I've seen this year. It's sort of a tried and true trope. But one of the things that it seems to set up, which kind of got me worried, but thankfully they don't get into, is, because their characters are body swapping into different characters, a boyfriend and girlfriend are both kind of at one point put into female bodies. And it kind of seems like they're going to kind of go down that track. And thankfully they stop themselves from doing that. So again, if you're watching the movie and that worries you, no, they're not. They don't dive into that. But kind of on a story, kind of as the narrative, maybe much like a lot of real world video games, this is largely a movie that's about nothing. It's not trying to say anything profound. It's not trying to. When it does kind of try and get into have some more heartfelt moments, it's hard to kind of feel the emotion because you have like the Danny DeVito and his Danny Glover's character trying to forgive each other and work out their differences. But because they're doing so through, The Rock and Kevin Hart, and they're doing kind of goofy accents, it's hard to feel any kind of real emotional attachment to to what's going on. But and again, and I don't think all movies have to have some message, some deeper trying to teach us stuff. I think it's fine, like a lot of video games, just to just be a fun adventure, just kind of entertain for 2 hours, and not trying to learn anything. So I think that's fine if that's what the movie wants to be. The problem is just that it's because it's not very entertaining, and it's not saying anything or kind of having any kind of emotional heart to it, that it just by the end of this film, when they start talking, okay, this is the last level of the game, I felt relief that this thing is finally almost over. But again, so I think overall, as you can probably tell, this movie just didn't do it for me. I think this is going to be a movie that just sort of comes out and gets forgotten. I don't know. I haven't seen the previous one, but I can't imagine that any of that goodwill that kind of carried over from the first one will carry over to this one. Again, all the actors are doing fine despite the kind of the awful accents. You got star talent involved, and they're all on the surface likable characters. This is a film that I think the first one kind of surprised people that there's still more to tell in the Jumanji story, and this film seems like it's now telling people that there is no more to tell in the Jumanji story. They've kind of got all they can out of the sponge, and this movie just felt like kind of a waste of time. But what about you? Maybe did you see if you saw the first one, maybe there'll be stuff in this one that makes it more endearing to you. Maybe you'll enjoy it more. I'd love to hear your perspective, especially if you really enjoyed this movie. Let me know why you enjoyed it, kind of what you thought of it. But again, for me, this movie just did not do it for me. So again, if you haven't done so already, we'd love for you to subscribe to this channel, keep up with all of our video content. Don't forget to hit that like button on this video. I want to thank you for watching and hope you'll continue to collide with our world for Christ.